8C. As soon as I'm done talking about what's on the test, answering a few questions, the rest of the time is yours to work today. So, this was 7 that you had to have done for me, where you had to do that perimeter, and we kind of talked about those questions. Your proficiency skills, if you didn't fill that in, you want to do that. We're going to do the what's on the test. So, the review for the test this stage, we're going to fill that in. Okay? So this is in the back of your notes, right? The very last page of your notes. Awesome. Some of you are still getting there, but most of you are there. So, over on the poster, it says I can explain the Pythagorean theorem. So if I am looking at that, first off, our test has 11 questions, and it is 65 points. Oh my. And what day is our test?
The 10th.
It is on Monday. Why is this not working all the way?
That's still the 10th.
Monday.
Oh, it's
10? 10. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We did. Yes, just the other day. Didn't we introduce him this class?
I believe so.
No.
Brayden was not here.
Yes, you did. No.
You were gone on Tuesday.
Yeah, I was here.
All right. Go ahead. We'll have you introduced.
I'm Andrew Tavares from MSUM over in Moorhead, and I'm currently in education at the moment, so I'm
So
observing
your
your
ed
class.
classes, you have to come in and start to be in the classroom and see if this is really what you want to do. So this is his beginning of his education class. So, all right. So now that we got that taken care of, so that first thing that we were looking at, it is that I can explain. That is going to be standard G6 is the standard. I can explain the Pythagorean theorem. Okay? This is that paragraph I was talking about. Okay? This is the paragraph I'm talking about. Yesterday we talked about this just a little bit. That was these things. It's 9C in your workbook. This is going to be worth 18 points. Someone will always ask me, Mrs. Thompson, do I have to use capitalization and punctuation? That is 3 points of that 18. Okay. So if you decide, you know, you don't like capitals, you like run-on sentences if you're writing this, I'm taking off points for that, right? You should in 8th grade be able to write sentences. This is on yesterday's daily planner where I talked about how the 3 different ways of explaining. You have choice 1, you have choice 2, and choice 3. This is also on the daily planner. So if you need to look at these, and you can see I have sentences and I have the vocabulary, so take a look at those if you need to. Okay, so that's 18 points on the test. One question. It looks exactly like 9C. Okay? That 9C in your workbook, that is what the exact test question. Okay? So it looks exactly like that. Okay? 18 points. If you have yet to practice that, I would practice it. I had someone telling me today that they were practicing in my advisory for the science one. They'd written out their explanation 3 times at home. They came in here and they did it 5 more times in advisory that morning. I'm thinking that person probably has an A on the test for explaining and being able to write it because they practice it many times. And I'll have students tell me, oh, you know, Mrs. Thompson, I read through that. I never wrote it once, but I read through it. It does not get in your brain unless you actually physically write it down. Now, there are people that do have photographic memory, but there's not many of you out there. And if you do, awesome. Then you probably don't need to do it. But the rest of us, if we're getting through life, we're writing it like 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Yeah, that's right on that page. So this is like that first column. So you got to be able to explain the Pythagorean theorem.
But it says how many questions.
Right, there's one question. One question, right? I gave you the question. It's 9C. It's one question worth 18 points. Okay? One question, 18 points. How well do you know it? I don't know. When you think about that last column, how well do you know it? That's going to be up to you. Have you practiced it at all? Have you tried writing it out? I would start doing that today, possibly in class. The next one on the poster says I can use the Pythagorean theorem to find missing side. So if I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem, that is standard, it's called G7 for our geometry standards. And it says that you are being able to, one of the things I'm going to ask you, there's a question that says, in a right triangle, find the missing side. Right? So I'm going to have a question where I say, oh, here's my right triangle. I might give you A and B, I might give you A and C, and I'm going to ask you to find that missing side, okay? So find the missing side. You're going to see one of those box problems, like B6, right? So questions 5 to 8 on that B6, the reason I was so picky on how you're doing it is because you're going to see that question on the test. So a lot of you, when I handed back your papers and said, yeah, that wasn't quite right how you did it, I want you to make sure you're doing it right before and you practice the rest of them in that review correctly, because if not, it's going to throw you off on the test. So practice it correctly. Another type of problem you're going to see is a perimeter problem. So when we think about our perimeter problems, that's that perimeter of the shaded region, right? We had on B8 you had a couple, there's a couple on B7, on B8, there's some in that review on B10 where you have to find the shaded region, so please make sure you go over those and you understand those. You're going to be asked in a picture to find like the length of the pole or the length of the wire, okay? So I'm going to give you a picture and say, oh, here is this information, and find how tall this statue is, or how tall the pole is, right? And if it's one of those finding the length of a pole, and it's broken, and it says, oh, you know, like this is the one that broke off, and I think that was like, was that on B8 yesterday? Yeah, B8, that number 2, okay? And it says, how long is that full pole? That's when you added these two lengths together. So just make sure you're checking those over. And then there's going to be another type of story situation. Okay? So this is all of the type where you are looking at, can I use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side? Okay? What is the converse one? So there's one question for each of these, and most of them, each one of these is like 1 point for each of these type of questions, and most of them are 4 points each. Okay, there's a couple that might be 3 or 5 points, but overall, they all average out to be about 4 different points. So if you had to use this in a couple of those squares going down, like mine, I had this filled in, like I did this, what I just put up here, I did this in about 2 or 3 boxes. So if you got it all in one, great, but you can have it going down further. You don't have to fill it all in one. The next standard that we are looking at is that we can use the converse. And the converse is standard G6, it's called. So when you look at those standards at the beginning of each unit, G6 is applying the converse, finding the converse, okay? So when I apply the converse, this is what I'm asking you, is it a right triangle? Converse, make sure I spell it right for you. This is where I give you 3 sides and I say, is it a right triangle? So I might say, given 3 sides, Q-I-T-H, that spells right? So when I am looking at this, when I'm looking at that theorem, given 3 sides, is it a right triangle? I'm going to ask you. How do we determine that? This is where we are looking at taking the a squared plus the b squared, and it equals c squared. You will have 2, 3 questions like this. Each one about 4 points. The last thing that we have up here is finding the distance in a coordinate plane. So the very last standard that we are looking at is finding distance in a coordinate plane. So if we are finding the distance in a coordinate plane, that is considered standard G8 is our standard. So we're going to find the distance in a coordinate plane. This is what we did in lesson B7. So if you need to go back to B7 notes, okay, if you get confused on how to plot the point X, Y, you want to make sure you have that done first, right? You need to know how to plot your points, and some of you are still getting confused as to where you place those, okay? There are 2 questions, and each one is 4 points each. So most of the questions are 4 points each, except that first one where you have to explain. Questions on anything that I could talk about. Questions as you look at your B8B. The shaded region, you're going to have a couple like that where you do perimeter. Anyone on this one? And if you finished 8B today, we're going to turn it in. Right? If you have this one done, you want to have your name on the top and turn it in. As soon as you finish it, you check the answers, right? Then you're going to go on to that 9A, and you're doing the even. Those are perimeter ones starting out again, okay? 9B, you don't have to do it. If you finish 9A, turn it in, right? So use your time today, but the first thing I want from most of you, and then you're finishing with this one. There's a box question, right? Right on that review. Here's one where you're comparing 2 things. Looking at a baseball diamond. Here's another box one, number 7. Okay? Finding the distances in a plane. So make sure these are the ones where you're trying to say, is it a right triangle as you look at those. Questions on anything else? This is how you're writing it. Pick one. As you're looking at that you think is going to be the easiest way for you to describe it. I'll probably leave this up as the 3 choices when you're working in class today. Questions? Yeah.
And you know 9A where we do every even? For more practice, can we do them all?
The 9B?
No, 9A, where you do every even.
9A, you're going to do every other problem, just the even.
Yeah.
And then the next page is like 9B or whatever. You don't have to do any of those for extra practice. That's up to you. Okay, but those ones where you see the 3 numbers and it says, is this a right triangle? I would try at least a couple, because how many questions did I say do we have of those on the test? We have 3 of them, right? I would make sure that if you look at that 9B, you know how to do those and check your answers. I gave you the answers for all of them. So you can use your time. You can move around the room and work with some other people. And there's a couple of you that I'm going to have come out and work with our practicum student who's here with us today, because I just think I haven't seen that much caliber work of yours, and I got to make sure you're understanding. And he'd also be able to help you out. So I'm going to have a few of you go out and do that, and the rest of you, if you are working, use your time, ask questions of myself and your classmates, but use your time. It should not be loud. It should be kind of quiet. Okay? If you have 8B done, you're going to turn it in. Okay? Yes, you can cut it out and record it in. All right.